Crush the terrorists by crushing their money machine. The same week we see a deadly terror attack in Berlin and a man arrested in Virginia for trying to send cash to ISIS. Now a bipartisan House report is calling on President-elect Trump to have the government team up even more with private companies to cut off the terrorist money supply once and for all. Will it work, or will it just create more useless bureaucracy? Hi, everybody. Merry Christmas. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus to find out with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Mike Ozanian, Sabrina Schaefer, John Tamny, and Bruce Japsen. So, Steve, is this report on the right track?
David, it's fine to do more coordination. You can usually do that with an email or a phone call and tell the bureaucrats to get off their duffs and work together. If they're serious about fighting funding for terrorism, cut that money off from Iran from that nuclear arms deal. No more money on that. Cut Iran off from the world banking system. Do the same thing with individual banks in Pakistan and elsewhere, and cut off various individuals we know who are bad guys. They're basic steps, but Iran's the big one. If they're not doing that, they're not serious.
Well, Rich, in addition to Iran, I think Steve's absolutely right, but in addition to that, they're still getting a lot of money from oil, about $500 million a year. We have had a tax on these oil supplies, but not enough. And there are also a lot of people in the region that are funneling money to them, right? Some of our supposed allies.
I think every administration, going back to at least the first George Bush administration, knows but doesn't really talk about the fact that Saudi Arabia and Qatar, their governments are financing these Sunni rebels, and which eventually flows into the terrorists. And why do they do that? Because, you know, it's a promise that the Sunni rebels won't overthrow these governments. But it comes back to hurt us. So I think that Trump, being a master negotiator, has to negotiate with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and use our leverage, you know, that we're now entering this cheap energy boom that, hey, we don't need you. We're going to put the thumb on you guys now.
We'll talk about draining the swamps. There's an example. We'll talk about the swamp in Washington, Mike Ozanian. Here's the House report. And, you know, God bless them. I'm sure they mean well. But the specific advice that Steve and Rich just gave isn't in this report. It looks, frankly, like a United Nations report.
Dave, unless there's something in there that talks about taking control of the caliphate, then it's not going to be effective at all. That's why no matter what you do in terms of trying to cut off their finances, unless you have strong military action, it's not going to be effective.
And as Sabrina, by the way, you also have people here that are trying to send money over there. As I reported in Virginia, they caught one guy. And lest people think that this is just an isolated case, you go into search in the Justice Department website, look for material support, and you find a whole list, dozens of individuals in this country that are sending money or trying to ISIS.
Right, and David, I feel like this has been a conversation we've had since September 11th, because we knew that people were being funded to initiate these attacks, and the money was going both ways. The problem is that government hasn't gotten any smaller in the past decade and a half. If anything, it has gotten bigger, it's gotten more bureaucratic and more convoluted. And so I worry sometimes that in this approach to sort of stamp out terrorism through different parts of government, that we are somehow just entangling things more. And we need to be very clear about what the mission is in each case.
Well, John Tamny is a big supporter of federal reports like this one, right, John?
Yeah. Without minimizing for a second the horrors of terrorism, what happened this past week in Berlin, this is quite simply not going to work. We know this well in the United States. For decades, the Fed, politicians, they've tried to restrict money flows. Money always reaches its intended target. So we'd empower the federal government even more, and we wouldn't be a lick more safe. Let's stop aggrandizing government. They can't fix this.
Well, Bruce, it is the Achilles heel of terrorism, the funding, because without the funding, they can't do much of anything except shout. Is there a way to do this? Is there a way to strangle their sources of funding?
Well, I believe there is, and I will say that that report looked a heck of a lot better on digitally rather than in print. But I would say that the president-elect needs to take this seriously and move past tweeting about his second-place finish in the popular vote here. I mean, it was a bipartisan report, which is a good thing. There's a lot of stuff in there. We have not had a successful, as the president said, a successfully executed attack from a foreign source, so we've done some things right, but I think more coordination and taking it seriously is a good thing, and it's bipartisan.
Steve, one of the problems about coordinating, particularly with the folks overseas, is how badly they have performed this week in trying to track down the terrorists. They finally killed the guy, but not before he'd crossed over many borders. And in fact, Europe's approach to terrorism very often has the opposite effect. Some of the terror suspects who committed the attacks in Paris a year ago and then fled to Belgium were getting a lot of money from the government's welfare funding. So not only did they not keep them out, but they were giving them money to boot.
Well, that gets to the whole thing, especially in Europe, is they're in an adequate way of figuring out who's coming in. And when Merkel, a little over a year ago, said she'd take 2 million refugees, she quickly backed off from it. But if you don't have a mechanism of determining who's coming in, you're going to have problems. And this gets back to Barack Obama, who didn't create a safe zone in Syria, which would have kept those millions of refugees from crossing into Europe and saved us and the world a whole lot of trouble and lives.
But, Rich, again, we've had a president these past 7.5 years who seems to approach the globalist perspective on these things, that we all have to work together. Frankly, I don't want to work together by the clowns over in Europe that have missed tracking down some of these terrorists.
You know, I think the root of the problem with Barack Obama is he lacked the confidence in the fundamental virtue of the United States to actually use our leverage in the world, whether it's with China, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran, and I think things will change with Donald Trump.
John, what do you think of that?
There's a big difference between being anti-murder and actually finding those people. You're looking around the world for the tiniest bits of evidence. The idea that any president is going to succeed in stamping out murder seems as unrealistic as doing it in the United States.
Bruce, one thing that does unite the world is money, frankly. It doesn't have to do with religion. It doesn't have to do with race. I think if we're going to work together at all, at least in the banking community, they could find ways of squeezing these terrorists, couldn't they?
Oh, definitely. And I think when you think about what is alarming to me on this whole Russian hacking, I mean, if they're able to, I think people should pay attention, say, if they're able to hack into people's emails, political figures, heads of state, people are going to wake up some morning and see, you know, their 401ks disappear. That's what worries me.
All right. I knew we'd get it back to the Russian hacking. Steve, final word, quickly.
Final word is get Iran, then they go after the others.
Okay. Start with